last week I was out, and it's that time of year when a storm can hit so quickly. And there was one particular storm where we were at 2 inches of rain an hour, which is a lot. And we were out walking down the street, and we could tell the storm was coming, and sure enough, it's one of those rainstorms where it just was a deluge, and it dumped water, and it was thundering, and it was lightning, and it was a storm that came, and as we were out there, we ducked into a store, because while the storm, you see, the storm didn't stop when we ducked into the store. The storm continued. In fact, it rained harder and harder, and it thundered more, and the storm raged. It didn't stop when we ducked into the store, but we found a refuge. And we stood in there in the dry, and the storm didn't touch us. The storm continued to rage, but we were in the dry. And as I think about this psalm, I think about prayer. Again, I can tell you, I can stand up here and I could spend 30 minutes telling you need to pray, you ought to pray. Pray every day. The Bible says to pray. God says to pray. God's commanded you to pray. Good people have prayed. Examples before you have prayed. I can say all of that, but I want you to get a hold of something. It's something that has to happen in our heart. I want you to know this morning, if you're in a storm, and if you're not in a storm right at this moment, you will be in a storm. If you're not in one right now, you may be sitting here and thinking, I'm not in the midst of a storm. Well, guess what? You will. Life is not storm-free. The Bible says it rains on the just and the unjust. You know what that means? It means being a Christian doesn't mean you are storm-proof, that you won't have storms in life. But I'll tell you what it does mean. It means in prayer, when we call upon the Lord, when we seek the Lord, when we understand that God is God, guess what happens? You have the ability to step in out of that deluge, because God, if we could just get a visual of this, if we could just get a visual of the storm that rages and being overwhelmed, if we could just get a visual picture of the fact that to turn aside is to turn to face the storm alone, and to turn to seek God, to pray is to discover that God is a refuge. God is a refuge. Now, you know what kind of person I am. I said to Lynn and Nick, hey, you want to go back outside? It's raining. No. Are you an idiot? Why would we go back out in the midst? I said, it's kind of letting up out there. It's not going to mess my hair up. I'm good. Why would you want to do that? Now understand that the storm didn't stop, but we're in the refuge. There are times that God miraculously, instantaneously reveals himself. And in my life, there have been times when God stepped in and the storm was raging in my life. And I was totally overwhelmed. And there were times, just as Jesus spoke to the storm and said, peace be still, and the winds and the waves obeyed his voice. I've experienced that in my life, where God spoke peace and the storm stopped. And the situation, God intervened. And God did things that I knew God intervened, and he stopped the storm, and it was peace. There have been other times in my life when the storm continued to rage, but I was underneath his refuge. And the situation didn't change, but the peace in my life was immeasurable, because I found my refuge in God.